Conservatives, stop buying into the left's narrative about what happened at the Capitol and in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. First of all, I need to be clear. What happened at January 6th at the Capitol riot, was stupid. It was ill-advised. Those people should never have been in the Capitol in the first place. And it just was a bad look, first of all. But second of all, you have to realize that there were people, tens of thousands of hardworking Americans that were in DC on that day because they felt like their vote was not being counted. They felt like their voices were not being heard. They felt like, as voting Americans, they had a really hard time and a really big problem with everything that happened in the 2020 election. So those concerns should not be discounted, and we should not be throwing every single person that was in Washington, D.C. on that day under the bus, which is exactly what is going on with a lot of conservatives and a lot of Republicans, especially never-Trumpers like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger. You know exactly who they are. And what they're doing is they're buying into the left's narrative that every single person that was in Washington, D.C. on January 6th was a racist, was a white supremacist, was an insurrectionist, was all of these buzzwords. And what they're doing when they buy into that, and some of you are buying into it as well, what you're doing when you're buying into that is you are completely discounting the tens of thousands of peaceful protesters that were in Washington, D.C. on January 6th, and you are discounting the reason that they were in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. These people were in Washington, D.C. because they had issues with that election. These people were in Washington, D.C. because they felt like their voices were not being heard and that their vote was being stolen. Now, the left has political motivations as to why they are trying to define the history of what happened on January 6th. Now, they want to define all of these people as racists and white supremacists and all of that stuff because they want to purge these people not only from polite society, but also from our military as well. When you look at what's going on in the military right now, they're having stand downs for quote unquote domestic extremism. They're talking about rooting out white supremacists and racists and all of this stuff in the military. Do we want white supremacists and racists out of the military? Absolutely, but that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about the domestic extremists that they're basically defining as anybody that was in DC on January 6th, or anybody that pulled the lever to vote for a Republican, or somebody that voted for Donald Trump. So you have to understand exactly what they're doing right there. So if conservatives continue to buy into the way the left is defining January 6th, we continue to lose the battle. So stand up for those people that were in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. Stand up for exactly why they were in D.C. on January 6th, and stop letting the left define the narrative about what happened in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. Because if you continue to let them do that, they will define it, they will own it, and they will use the political power they are looking for to purge conservatives out of every aspect of public life, including the military.